Hello everyone, here psst.one. Today another interview. We talked with Jem the Misfit. Her works encompass from visual to audiovisual performance to installation. She works for huge festivals like Time Warp, Sonos Festival. Her style, in my opinion, is unique. She creates this shape on the screen that are so original somehow. So, enjoy! You born and grew up in New Zealand, right?
Yes, yeah. I was born in Auckland, which is in the north of New Zealand. And grew up there, went to university in New Zealand, but in another city, in Wellington, which is the capital city, but actually smaller than Auckland. I moved to Berlin at the end of 2012. So in between leaving university and moving to Berlin, I actually lived in Melbourne in Australia for 5 years, and then decided it was time to move even further away and go to Europe. So.
And you really did the visual there, right?
Yeah, that was really the first time I had commercial jobs as a VJ and made a community there of other visual artists and really kind of got into it, I guess. Like from university, I started, I guess, at university and had a small go at doing live visuals. But it was really once I moved to Australia. Once I left Australia, I traveled for about 6 months around Europe, and I always had the idea that I would live in Berlin, but I also wanted to travel a bit and to see some other festivals and really to get the feel that that was the right decision. So yeah, I went to LPM, which was amazing for meeting a lot of visual artists and setting up a network here in Europe. Also, obviously, Mapping Festival was really good for this too.
You start your career with more analog video recording stuff. Now you have this unique style with the abstract structure. How did you reach this aesthetic?
I think these crystal forms have always been a part of my work. Like I studied fine arts in New Zealand and I did a lot of sculpture, and they were forms that I was making physically in 3D space, and for me they were related to the idea of utopia or utopian architecture in some way. And so these forms, I guess, have followed me through my different evolutions of art. And I think the transition from more filmed work to these shapes actually happened once I got MadMapper. And I was just playing with MadMapper, and I didn't have any structure that I was mapping onto. I was just making structures, like imaginary structures within the software, and started to make these gravitated back towards these geodesic structures and found that it made a really interesting effect. And it also helped move me away from a rectangular screen, which starts to get a bit confining once you're always producing things for this rectangle. And I like to break up the space a bit and have dark areas and new forms evolving. So I'd say, yeah, that's where it came from, and then it felt kind of right to continue.
Your work encompasses from audio-video performance and visual for huge event. What is the different approach in these two categories?
Yeah, I mean they're quite different, as you say. So for an audio-visual performance, I'm normally working directly with a musician, and I find that really nice because we actually have time together and we can discuss ideas, and there tends to be more of a conceptual base to it, some kind of idea that we want to convey for the show, and we can really craft a whole, say, 40 minutes to 1 hour and craft the flow and the stages within the set that we want the audience to experience something. And often that's also working on a projector as the light medium, and that tends to allow me to be more detailed and have subtle textures, subtle colors, and I guess it gives me a bit more space. I also can control maybe how it's set up in a gallery and dictate the whole environment, which is quite nice. And that's in contrast to a festival where you're normally told this is the stage design, this is a screen that you'll be using, work with these parameters. And they're generally LED walls, so the style of visuals for me has to adapt to the technology, and they're very, very bright and tend to be lower resolution. So I tend to go more graphic-y. I make quite a lot of 3D visuals in Blender that work quite well. I enjoy this also, this like impromptu improvisation where you kind of get in a flow and develop something completely new that you didn't know was going to happen. But it's quite a different process to the planned audiovisual performance.
You did, and also you still have the performance with Paula Temple. How was the process to work with her, and also all the story behind this performance?
Yeah, really interesting. Like working with Paula was great. I really enjoyed the collaboration. The first show, the Nonagon 1, we developed really because there was a need for another show outside of a club environment. We had a booking to perform at the Eye, which is the Film Institute in Amsterdam, and so on a big cinema screen to a sit-down audience. And we were previously doing sort of 4 or 5 a.m. club sets, which just not going to work there. So we thought, okay, this is a good opportunity to actually develop an audiovisual show that we could control from start to finish, and we know the audience will be watching rather than running around partying. So it was quite different for us at the time. And I think, yeah, it was interesting to sit down and try and really craft ideas together, and nice to have input. Like I could also suggest some ideas with sound, and Paula vice versa for the visuals. We started to talk about verbs, like how Paula was working with sound. She was talking about being stretching and distorting, reversing. These are processes that she applies to sound, and that sounded interesting to me as well, to think about applying these to video. And so we had then 9 verbs that we had for each section, and applied these and then worked out a nice flow of how these would sort themselves out. So that was the first version, and for me the visuals were very filmed. Like I did a lot of time-lapse photography on substances that were melting, so I could make forms, geodesic forms that would disintegrate in some way, or so that I was following these ideas of distort and melt, reverse. But then the second version of the show, we had some time apart and hadn't played the show for a while, and we got a new booking, and we thought, okay, we need to change this a bit. There was also a theme for the festival. We were booked for the Node Festival in Frankfurt, and they had a theme of designing hope. Generally, I would say my work tends to think more about dystopia now than utopia, so I was thinking, okay, this is going to be really hard. I came together with Paula, and it turned out we'd been reading very similar materials, similar books, and thinking about similar ideas. What came out of it was that they both talked about bringing different people from different areas together, and that collectively this is a way forward. This is a hope when not just you're not just fighting for feminism, you're not just fighting against racism, you can fight for everybody and bring many different ideas together, and when everyone comes together, this is a way forward. And that also, so collectively, multiplicity, these kind of ideas, but also action, that it's about doing something so that there is only hope with action. And this kind of became the new structure for the show. So it was like a more emotional approach to how we designed the show. And then we sat down together and found music that Paula had been working on. So we used some bits from the old show musically, and a couple of bits visually, but mostly I made new material that kind of spoke to this development from fear to action. Yeah.